Well, there are two ways to look at this question specifically. One way is to look at what for OAU and AU were established in the first place, and then measure up vis-a-vis what they have performed and what their mandate was. The second prism through which you can also assess is counterfactual questions, I call them. What if OAU or AU were not in existence? So these are two perspectives that we can look at. If we look at the first one, you remember that OAU was established during a time where Africa was under colonialism and under apartheid. Yeah. And the two most important successes of OAU are to remove colonialism and apartheid from Africa, and it has played a very important role in achieving this. These were some of the prominent mandates of OAU. Now, if you look at it from a ceiling where OAU should have achieved what it should have achieved, or where AU, the African Union, should have been in terms of mandate from the ceiling, then you cannot avoid from being disappointed. You will be dismayed by the performance. But if we look at it from the floor where we started in 1963 when OAU was established, Africa has gone very far away from that. It has progressed significantly. That some of the progress is attributable to OAU and AU. I mentioned two. The anti-colonialism struggle was spearheaded by OAU, and also the anti-colonialism, anti-apartheid was spearheaded by OAU. That's the reason why when OAU was not able to address the other questions, the other mandates, to discharge its other mandates, then the need to transform from OAU to AU was necessary. And partly because most of OAU leaders, including in our region, in Ethiopia, for example, Imperial Haile Selassie, and in Kenya, Jomo Kenyatta, were at the leadership of OAU. And they were active in anti-colonialism, including in removing British colony in Kenya. But above that, above all, they were also very active in the anti-apartheid struggle. They supported Mandela, they supported Robert Mugabe, and so on. All those icons of Southern Africa who were fighting anti-apartheid, the anti-apartheid struggle. Now, while they did this one at their foreign policy on Africa, that they were very progressive on Pan-African issue, but they were regressive on internal issues. They were not as democratic as you wish them, which was one of the demands of OAU. They were not in terms of developmentalist, in terms of economy, that they were more into foreign policy in terms of Pan-African system, supporting the Pan-African struggle against apartheid and colonialism. The problem was they were not sufficiently enough equipped or Pan-Africanist in terms of how they deal with their own people. So, as we know, for this reason, most of the Pan-Africanist leaders who were anti-apartheid and anti-colonialism ended up into dictatorship. And as a result, the name that OAU is a club of dictators become an important description. And it has some truths, definitely. It should not undermine what has been achieved by OAU. But at the same time, we shouldn't also allow that OAU has to say that OAU has achieved what it should have achieved. So the change to AU has come. Now, the same thing about AU we can say a lot in terms of achievement. And this takes me to the second perspective, or the prism that I mentioned earlier, through which we can assess AU's performance. And this is the counterfactual questions we can raise. Imagine you don't have AMISOM in Somalia. Without AMISOM, the war in Somalia would have been in the neighboring countries. if you don't contain it in Somalia, if you don't fight it in Somalia, it was highly likely that Al-Shabaab, before that Al-Ittihad, Al-Islamiyah, and other forces would have used as a springboard to attack the other countries, neighboring countries. And beyond that, they would have plotted, organized, and they would have a safe haven of operation, command center from Somalia that they could operate in Europe or in the US or otherwise, other places. But the same thing with Darfur. Without AU, you wouldn't have UNAMID, the UN AU hybrid mission in Darfur. And you wouldn't have the same situation, the kind of Darfur we have. The reason why Darfur is not in the media now, that we don't hear about Darfur like we were hearing in 2003, 2004, 2007, up to 2010 almost, is because Darfur is doing well, comparatively again. In a relative term, Darfur is doing better than it was 10 years ago. And that is attributable to the UN and AU. Actually, the major component of peacekeeping in our region are coming from AU members. So in my opinion, this organization, AU, is doing what it can do within the mandate it is given and the resource it is availed to it. So in a relative term, if we look at it where we were 70 years ago, then the progress we have made is significant. That gives a lot of hope to push even further in terms of performance.